start by congratulating all of you. Pretty big honor to be chosen to be part of this group, and so you should feel good about your progress already in something that I know that's important to you. And I also wanted to congratulate Tim and his whole team, Mike, everyone who comes together, all the coaches, to do this. I'm sure you realize they're doing this as what we call labor of love. They're doing it because they love the sport of basketball and they believe that we can do a better job of developing opportunities for our high school basketball players here in Michigan. So hats off to you guys for taking this on, and I know you all appreciate the opportunity that you've been given. So how many of you know Grant Hill, know who Grant Hill is? Raise your hand. Okay, so when Grant first was drafted out of Duke by the Pistons, he played here about, 5 years, I think. And he and I occasionally would speak at events. And one night, he and I were speaking at an event at the Detroit Children's Hospital. And I walked up, and as all good corporate executives, I had a big briefing book and a speech, and about 3 inches worth of stuff. And Grant had one note card. And he looked at me before he went up for a speech, and he said, Rick, do you know the 5 B's of a good speech? And I said, no, Grant, what are the 5 B's of a good speech? He said, be brief, brother, be brief. I've learned from that. I've probably given 1,000 speeches since then. It is better to be shorter than longer. So I was going to hit a few comments and then primarily open it up for you guys to ask any questions you like, and I'll try to respond to them. I wanted to run through a little bit of maybe a little more detail than what James offered, my own kind of career and engagement with basketball, and then talk a little bit about kind of what I learned in my efforts at basketball that helped me in my business career, and I think these are opportunities that you will also have. In fact, I've heard already in some of the presentations and some of the discussions you've had, even out on the floor, that a lot of the lessons that I learned, others who have been successful in the sport have learned it and taken to other fields. So like all of you, probably the most important thing in my life when I was a kid was sports. And around about 7th or 8th or 9th grade, I began to focus in on basketball. I wasn't the best guy even on my team back then, but I used to shoot all the time. I loved to shoot. I would go out and play in our neighborhood on a dirt court in the winter. It's not as cold as it is here, but still in Virginia. Cold, and we'd have foul shooting contests, and just loved to shoot. And eventually what I found out was that while there are other people that maybe had more talent physically, they didn't work as hard. And so I kept working it and had some success in 9th and 10th grade. Although in 10th grade I still played on the junior varsity basketball team. At the end of that season, our varsity coach did something which he hadn't done before, which was moved 3 of us up from the junior varsity team to the varsity and had us start in the tournament. And our varsity team wasn't very good that year, so we were seated low. So lo and behold, we go into our first game and upset the second-ranked team in the tournament, and I was fortunate enough to be the leading scorer. That was a great feeling, except for I also learned that things are tougher at the next level, because like the second play of the game, their center, who was like, I'd say 100 pounds more than me at that point, I wasn't quite this heavy then, gave me a good shot in the mouth, and so my mouth was swollen up and I could hardly talk. I know some of you have experienced that, but it taught me that, hey, we're at a new level, we got to raise our game. And so from there I played extensively as a junior. I captained our team junior and senior year in high school, and for that era had reasonably good numbers, maybe 17 points one year, 19 the next average, and maybe 12 rebounds as a junior and 14 as a senior. And so I thought we were going to be pretty good, and I was getting interest from a lot of colleges. So it got to be the beginning of our senior year, and it was the day the local paper published the reports of the next year's basketball, who they would predict would win and everything. And the photographer had been out and taken a picture of my coach and me and our other good player, and so I was thinking they're going to have a really good story on it. So I run down, open up the newspaper, and there's this picture that I just described to you. And underneath of it was a quote from our coach. And the quote was, "We're not big, but we are slow." Think about that for a second. So I said, I think the coach is trying to send us a message. I thought what he was trying to do was to motivate us. Turns out about 35 years later, I was at my high school being inducted into our Athletic Hall of Fame, and that same coach came that night. And I said, hey, Coach, when you said that, were you just trying to motivate us? He goes, no, I was just telling the truth. Which was, I think, as I got to the end of my senior year, was being understood by more and more college basketball coaches, because all those guys who had expressed interest, as I got to the end of that, not so many were willing to offer scholarships. They generally were smaller schools, in today's parlance, Division II, Division III. Fortunately, I hadn't really relied only on basketball as a venue to get me into college and to think about what might happen, as much as I love basketball. But I had worked pretty hard in school. I wasn't the smartest guy in school, but I probably worked as hard as anybody else, and ended up with a good academic record. I finished number 3 in my high school class and had pretty good college board scores. So I had some good choices for college, but I had to make a decision: did I want to go a place where I knew I could go and be a basketball star, or did I want to go to the best school I applied to that admitted me, and that was Duke? And I said, I think I probably better do the latter. The fact that my father had gone to Duke in 1950, he probably brainwashed me a little bit in that regard. By the way, I did the same. Our 3 sons also all went to Duke. They had choices, but I did do a little selling there, I have to admit. But I went down there, and I went down there with 2 questions in mind. Can I compete with some really good basketball players athletically, and can I compete in the classroom with a lot of really smart kids who came from, you know, maybe better schools than I went to. I went to a public high school in Richmond. And what I found out through 4 years there was that the level of athletic competition was good. And so I played my freshman year. I got to play a reasonable amount, although it was probably telling that my best scoring game was the first game I ever played in, and it was kind of downhill after that. And as I had a chance to play against some other players, it was pretty clear to me that as much as I wanted to, I wasn't going to be able to compete at that level. Do any of you guys know the name David Thompson? I'm sure some of the coaches do. So David Thompson was, I don't think it's too much hyperbole to say, he was sort of probably the Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan was around. He was about my height, had a vertical jump, at least the legend goes, about 44 inches this guy could get up. He was a great player at NC State. And we played them twice that year. I fouled out both times in about 10 minutes of covering him. And I remember distinctly the worst basketball play I ever made was I was bringing the ball across midcourt. I did what your coaches tell you never to do, threw a cross-court pass. And then as soon as the ball left my hand, I saw out of the corner of my eye this blur, red blur. He was wearing a red uniform. And David picks it off in full stride, takes 2 dribbles. Back then, by the way, you couldn't dunk. So he was about 2 feet over the basket and just dropped the ball in. And I remember thinking, I think that I had to pick one moment when I finally said, you know, you're probably not going to make your living in the NBA. It was about then when I said, this guy plays at a different level. By the way, as a sidelight, about 5 years ago, the guy who runs Caterpillar, did at the time, Jim Owens, he's a graduate of NC State, he called and said, would you like to meet me down to see the NC State and Duke basketball game in Raleigh? And he said, I've got a special treat for you. And I went down, and his distributor, Caterpillar distributor for North and South Carolina, had brought to the game with him as guests, one of his guests was David Thompson. In case you don't know the story of David, so he was the best player in NCAA basketball during his career, went to the pros, started out terrifically, big scorer, had problems with drugs, and then kind of disappeared and had some really tough times and came back a little bit. So it was nice for me to see him. I remembered playing him a lot better than he remembered playing me, by the way. But it was good to see him back. He and I sat beside each other during the game, which Duke won, by the way. He got up about every 10 minutes, and he finally explained, he said, you know, my knees hurt so badly that I have to get up and move every once in a while. And I said, David, that's because you jump so high. If you played a horizontal game like me, my knees are fine. They don't hurt at all. So anyway, it was nice to see him after that. But anyway, so about that time, back to my story, it was pretty clear to me that I probably the time to begin to focus on academics. So I didn't play, not having been on basketball scholarship, but on an academic scholarship. I went ahead and just focused in on my studies and did pretty well at Duke, and in fact finished, I think, 10th or 12th out of a class of probably 1,200 people. So, and what I learned from that, by the way, is there were a lot of people at Duke that were a lot smarter than me, but I had discipline and I was willing to work hard, and so I got good results. Then I went on, I decided I wanted to go into business and wanted to get a master's degree in business administration called an MBA, and so I applied to some of the best schools in the country, was fortunate to get in some, and went to Harvard. And again, I was concerned, hey, can you compete with these guys? These are the best business students around, many people. In fact, the average age of the class was probably 27, 28. They worked many years. And what I found again is if you go, apply yourself, you can do well. And so I did fine there and graduated and joined GM in New York and went on with my career from there. And so there were always these kind of issues that you faced in life, which road to take. But what I found is, what I would recommend to you all, stay focused and work hard. You've got a gift for basketball. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. But as our Mr. Basketball told us and showed us with his shooting, people can outwork you or you can outwork other people. And so you want to excel in basketball and go on to the next level, you got to work hard. You can't just take the fact that you've got talent. You've got to use that talent and develop it. Second of all, no matter how hard you work on your basketball, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. You could be injured. Your interests may change. Who knows? So working your academics, doing the best you can in the classroom, being organized, being focused, really important. Third thing, which I didn't mention, but I should have, because of the kind of stature you have in your school as a basketball star, people look up to you as a leader, and you will have opportunities to lead in other organizations. And I would encourage you to take advantage of those. I had a chance in high school and in college to have leadership positions as president of the student body in high school. And what it did, it was an additional time commitment. So it taught me, gee, if you want to study, if you want to play basketball, if you want to do these other things, you've really got to be organized. You've got to have a plan for each day, for each month, and you've got to execute that plan. And it doesn't have time for a lot of monkey business, which I think actually was good for me. And second of all, you really put yourself in leadership positions outside basketball, you grow. You get a chance to interact with different kind of people on different kind of issues. Tim talked about how you conduct yourself with other people. You learn a lot of skills that I promise you really carry through later in life. You can really tell somebody who's had leadership training and has leadership skills. And these are the people that rise to the top of the organization, of every profession. You can tell people who have had experience in leading. And so I would encourage you, if you get a chance to be involved in student government or clubs or at your church in leadership positions, take those on, even though it takes a little time, because you'll find that you'll grow as a person by doing that. The other thing I wanted to make sure was clear. So I've told you that I've sort of had different choices I've had to make in life, just as you do. Where to go to college, focus more on academics. When I think back, when I speak to student groups, I think back to when I was finishing business school at Harvard. Had a lot of job opportunities, and I just said, as I started that process, the only thing I don't want to do is go work in New York City. So sure enough, interview a bunch of different places, go to GM, they had a financial office in New York then. I thought it was just the most exciting place in the world to work. So having said I wasn't going to work in New York City, end up going to work in New York City. Then before I start the job there, somebody calls me from the office and says, hey, there's different parts of the office you can work in, blah, 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 overseas area, blah, blah, blah. I said, look, I'll work in any area, but I don't want to work in the overseas area because I don't really have any interest there. So I was signed to work in the overseas area. Then a few years later, 4 years later to be exact, was called into the back office by the corporate treasurer, said, hey, we'd like you to, we think we got a great opportunity for you. I was 29 then. You can go down and be treasurer of our business in Brazil, GM do Brazil, which is a big job, great opportunity at that age. I'm thinking I probably don't want to do that because hey, you can't watch basketball from there. And, I never sort of considered myself an international person, and so I went home and conferred with my wife. By the way, an important lesson for you all later on when you get married. Always ask your wife before you make big decisions and do whatever she says, and they'll be the right decisions to make. So I said to my wife, you don't want to move to Brazil, do you? She said, are you kidding? this is the greatest opportunity we've ever had. So we moved to Brazil, and it was a tremendous experience. We lived there for 5 years, and from there, our oldest 2 sons were born there, and then we moved to Canada, we moved to Switzerland, and we moved back to Brazil, where I had a chance to be the president, and then moved back of our business there, and then moved back to the U.S. When I was 39, and I was asked to be the chief executive officer at GM. And so what it taught me was by doing things throughout my career that I probably wouldn't have initially said it's what I want to do, but I was willing to listen to ideas about other options. I really had a chance to do some exciting different things, and it was tremendously impactful in my career. From basketball, the lessons that I learned that I think were helpful, I mentioned hard work in anything you do. If you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a coach, discipline and hard work are worth a lot. And if you want to be a great basketball player, as already been said today by a couple of people, it's an important ingredient. You have to apply the great skills that you have. Second of all, I think your engagement in sports provides you an advantage in a lot of professions, because in sports, unfortunately, sometimes you lose. You learn to lose, and you learn to get beat sometimes. It's no fun, and none of us are that good at accepting it. But what do you do after you lose? Pick yourself up, you get your teammates around you, say we got to improve, we can enhance our game, and so you become more resilient. And as you get out into professional careers, whatever they are, I can assure you, as much fun as you have, as much as you enjoy it, every day, it's not a slam dunk. Things come up that you're not planning on, things come up that you don't like. Sometimes you make the wrong decisions. And you have to be willing and able to pick yourself back up and go back in the next day with enthusiasm, with energy, and with leadership. And I particularly found this, by the way, as you get into higher levels in companies. You make zillions of decisions, you have hopes for the economy, sometimes that stuff doesn't work out. The people who work for you are not looking for you to come in to say, hey, we got whipped and there's nothing else we can do. They're looking for you to come in and say, okay, had a bad day yesterday or a bad month or something bad happened, can't give up, here's what we're going to do next, here's our plan, this is the change that we're going to make, let's go get it. They're looking for you to give them a vision, a plan, and move forward. And I certainly learned a lot about resiliency playing basketball. One other thought that I'd pass on to you, I learned from Coach Krzyzewski at Duke. By the way, you said they should, if they get recruiting calls, return the calls and say thank you for calling Coach Krzyzewski. Who knows how to spell Krzyzewski? Better study up. It's K-R-Z-Y-Z-E-W-S-K-I. But if he calls, you might want to know how to spell his name, okay? I don't think too many people in the world can. But he talks about something that I think is really important. It reflects his upbringing in the city of Chicago, I'm sure, where he always took buses around back then. But he talks about getting the right people on your bus. And what he means by that is you go through life, you're going to, by virtue of the friendships you make, the places you work, the people you work for, the person you marry, you're going to bring people onto your bus. And Mike's point is that you want to bring on people who share your views and values, who want you to succeed, who you want to help succeed, and who are committed to the same kind of things as you are. And you guys being already successful and well known in your schools, there's a lot of people who are going to want to hang around with you. You need to decide who are the people that you want to associate with. You're known by the people that you associate with. Who are those people? Who are those people that can help you? Who are those people who understand what you want to do, are going to support you in your success? And I think if you do that, you'll find the journey's a lot more fun, and you get a chance to learn from them. Tim, I think in the interest of time, why don't I stop then and now and ask if you've got questions about the car business, about basketball experience, anything you'd like to ask?
Let's take 2 really good questions.
There's one over here.
Yes. Can you stand up and introduce yourself and your school, please?
My name is Cliff, and I go to WLAP. What is your advice to someone who wants to make a lot of money when they're old?
Okay, that's a good question. You heard the question. What's your advice for some? Okay, so for someone who wants to make a lot of money when they're older, outside of obviously what you'll make in the NBA. Thanks. That's a good question. My advice would be to choose a field that you have a passion for, that you're willing to work hard to be successful in. Get good advice. Don't fall for quick, get-rich-quick schemes. And elevate yourself to your top of your profession. So if you want to be, you can make a lot of money doing just about anything. Being a lawyer, being a doctor, being a basketball coach, being an auto exec, although some make more than others, unfortunately, but a lot of business opportunities. But what I found is the people that get to the top and make a lot of money, they almost never go into it saying, I want to make a lot of money. They go into it and say, I'm really interested in this. I'm going to do my best at it. They get promoted more than they might have ever thought they were going to get promoted, and then the rewards come with it. So I would encourage you to, of course, we're talking about beyond basketball. Find something you really have an interest in that you want to work hard at, and I think you'll find, if you're successful in it, that the financial rewards will come. Yes, sir. Thank you. One more. Yes.
My name is Wagner with Aspen School. What, as you move around the world, what was the most universal skill that you learned as a person, as a anything?
Great. Thanks, Luke. So the question is, as I moved around the world, what was the most universal skill that I learned? And that's an easy one. The most important thing that I learned, and it works everywhere, is that you have, if you want to be successful, you have to interact well with people. And you do that by showing them respect, particularly if you're in another country, learning something about their culture, trying to learn some of their language, even if you can't learn it all, valuing their inputs, and giving them the opportunity to succeed. If you do that, and you do it in a way that builds on the objectives of your company or your business or whatever, then you will engage them and they will do anything you ask of them. And I think that's true of any walk of life. If you try to effectively interact with people, ask them about their interests, people do not, a lot of people are turned off if you come in and say, I'm so-and-so, I'm a basketball star, blah, blah, blah. Instead, if you come in and say, what do you do? What are your interests? People like to tell you what they do. They like to talk about their own success, their culture, their background. And you'll learn a lot if you ask those kind of questions, and you find people will follow you and do just about anything that you think is right for your activity. Do we have a coach question?
Just quickly piggyback off of what you mentioned, hard work and discipline. And we had a sidebar earlier, but would you mind sharing with the kids, as CEO, you were one of the best in your company, in your profession, leader of one of the largest firms in the world. What was your schedule like? What type of hours and time did you put into, holding that position of leadership?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think sometimes people don't, if you're not in a specific profession, whether it's coaching or being a doctor or a lawyer or business, they don't understand the kind of commitment you need to make if you want to be successful. And so I would say, during my years as CEO, so this is a big company, it's global, so that brings complexity, but my normal day, I'd leave the house at 6:30 in the morning, come down to Renton if I wasn't traveling, and I would probably head home about 7:30 or 8 at night, and I would always bring a big briefcase, and after having dinner and saying hi to the kids, and I would go work for 2 or 3 hours at night. So if you added it all up, and then on Saturday and Sunday, if I weren't traveling for business, normally I would work somewhere between, just go through paperwork or phone calls or whatever, anywhere from 6 hours if the boys had sporting events to the 12 hours if they didn't. So if you add it all up, kind of 80 to 100 hours a week. And while you're doing it, it was fine. When you stop doing it, you go, wow, that was a lot of work. I'm not sure what that was all about. But what I did was, and this is another, I think it's not different than what I told you earlier, but just to put a point on it, you really have to, when you have something that has that kind of commitment, you have to prioritize. You have to say, what do you want to do? And so given that I knew to do my job, I was going to have to work those kind of hours, I would always then kind of devote the rest of the time during that age to, I'd figure out the boys' big school events, their big sporting events. I'd put those on the calendar. I'd go to 80% of their football, basketball, lacrosse games. In fact, I used to have other wives come up to me and say, I told my son that if you as the CEO of GM could leave to come watch his kid, your son's 8th grade basketball game, then he better get over here to see the game. So I kind of chuckled at hearing that. But by the way, I used to watch games with Bill Lambier sometimes, whose son was the country at that point. But what it really taught me is you have to prioritize. So I worked hard and did my best at work. I really tried to stay close to our kids and our family at that point. And there wasn't a lot else that I did. I didn't have time for many other things, which explains, and Tim can vouch for this, why my golf game even today. But it really highlighted, decide what you want, prioritize it, and don't try to spread yourself too thin. You really gotta think through that and make those calls. And at different times of your life, you'll have different priorities.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. I want you guys to appreciate the fact that he has given his time. He loves the game, and he's here to help you to prioritize and to learn lessons that are going to expand your vision of being more than just a basketball player. So let's all thank Mr. Wagner for